think in the comments below.
But I found this one. This was very interesting. Apparently, Cardinal Victor Fernandez, who is the head of the dicastery for the Doctrine of the Faith, seems to suggest, or at least did at one point in his long career now, that hell could be empty. It could be. Not even Adolf Hitler had to be sent to hell, apparently. We're going to find out exactly what he said with Michael Hichborn from the Lepanto Institute. Michael, Merry Christmas to you. Good morning to you. Thanks for being on the team.
Merry Christmas and soon to be Happy New Year to you and yours.
Yeah, praise be to God. So Cardinal Fernandez, the gift that keeps on giving, it seems. There was a new statement that came out. What's the story here?
Well, it's not a new statement. It was something that he wrote in a booklet, I would say. It's a 45-page treatise that he wrote on Romans 9 through 11. And it was written in 1995.
Okay.
But what he wrote should disqualify him from the position that he currently holds at the dicastery for the Doctrine of the Faith. It's pretty egregious. In this treatise, it's a very long treatise on predestination and grace. That's the title of it. Not Revelations 9 through 11, or I'm sorry, Romans 9 through 11. Predestination and grace. That's the translation. It's all written in Spanish, and I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce the Spanish because if I do, I will offend all of your listeners.
Okay.
But at the very end, on the last page, he's kind of summarizing everything that he had written in this treatise. And he talks about, well, this is why it's important for us to understand that there's an elect, that there's a predestination, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then he says this, says, finally, I believe that all that we have reflected on allows us to say the following. And he gives the quote, I have a firm confidence that all will be saved. A confidence that is not based on a wish, nor on my compassion for men, but on what I know of God and of his concrete plans, thanks to his revelation. And then he goes on, he says, it is then a most firm confidence that has its foundation in reality, in the divine way of dealing with man in this concrete plan of salvation. So what he is writing here is this idea that predestination indicates that man is not only going to be saved, but that all men will be saved. This is universalism. And it really should have disqualified him from his position.
It seems like we've talked about this before. Bishop, what's his name? Bishop Barron. Bishop Barron has gone through this in the past. Several years ago, he had statements, and I think he even doubled and tripled down on those statements, basically sort of suggesting the same thing. This has been a sentiment post-Vatican II where the modernist crowd really, 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 really wants the church to embrace this idea that everybody gets to go to heaven, right?
Sure. It was developed by the modernists in the late 1800s. It was reconstituted by the Nouveau Théologie in the early 19th century, which is nothing but modernism repackaged. But the idea that all men will be saved is what is rooted firmly in this idea of interfaith dialogue, that we're not really trying to evangelize anybody, but what we want to do is to get all of these religions working together for the better of humanity, for the better of mankind. So it doesn't really matter what you believe as long as you are working together and working in harmony. And so they're not trying to convert anybody from one faith to another. They're just trying to get them to play along. And that's it's a terrible, terrible, horrible thing to do.
You know, but it doesn't pass the smell test. I mean, just the smell test. You don't have to be a theologian or St. Thomas Aquinas or Bonaventure to figure this stuff out. I mean, if hell is empty, if everyone is saved, why do I have to be Catholic? Why do I have to go to church ever? Why can't I do as Martin Luther did and commit adultery and murder and all this other licentious behavior? Why can't I just live my life however I want, and in the end, I get to go to heaven no matter what?
Well, that was what Martin Luther prescribed. He said that, as long as you have faith, then what you do doesn't matter. And he said, go forth and sin boldly. Talk about a hellish prescription for anybody. But, you're right. The idea that we no longer have to be Catholic, and you get this from a lot of the post-Vatican II crowd, where they say, well, as long as somebody is a good Muslim, then they have a chance of salvation. As long as somebody is a good Hindu, and they're practicing their faith with fervor, then it doesn't really matter. And it's a damnable idea, because what you're saying is that baptism's not necessary, and you're calling our Lord and the Holy Spirit a liar.
Yeah. This Cardinal Fernandez, he has had a lot to say in his career as a Catholic priest and bishop. And how does a guy like this get the nod for the Doctrine Chief? Whatever happens in the next conclave, don't you agree that this has to be like one of the first priorities is to put somebody in the office who actually believes the Catholic faith?
Well, one would hope.
One could only hope.
I think that the question really could be called with regard to our current pontiff. I wonder sometimes if he actually believes what the Catholic Church has always taught, because he says some of the most bizarre things. And it's okay to question that, simply because when he says something that seems to contradict what the Church has always taught, and you line them up and you go, what are you talking about? And he refuses to clarify. Well, what are you going to do with that? And so, yeah, one can only hope that the conclave would choose a pontiff who really believes what the Church teaches. But these days, it's hard to tell.
Yeah, it sure is. I remember back in the 90s, when I got out of the Marine Corps in 95, there was a book that became wildly popular, and it was being passed around. All my friends and family were all reading it. It was a short book, and it was a near-death experience about a woman who died and went to heaven, and then she wrote her account. But she was a very bizarre character. She dressed like Native American people, although she wasn't. She had visions of demons in her hospital room. And her vision of heaven was basically that everyone made it to heaven. No one ever went to hell. And when asked about, well, what about people like Hitler? She would say, well, he learned his lesson. He regretted some things. He regretted a few of his decisions, but ultimately it's about life learning lessons. And then, of course, she talked about reincarnation. It seems like this idea of everybody makes it to heaven falls into the gobbledygook and pantheistic ideas of Hinduism and some of these other Eastern religions. It seems like a corruption of sorts. Would you say that's fair?
Well, sure. It's a pagan idea that's been repackaged and sold as a new heresy. That's really the best way to describe it. And these people that come out, and I remember back in the early 2000s, I was on a message board when message boards were still a thing.
You're revealing your age.
Yes, I know. But there was a guy who claimed that he had had a near-death experience, and he saw something very similar to what this woman had described. And I just kept exposing him as a prophet of the devil. He's a prophet of hell, and trying to sell this idea as something that's truth when really it's nothing more than his own personal opinion at best. Experience is not doctrine, and it never will be. But that's what the modernists try to tell us. They tell us that religion is an experience that wells up from within, and that experience then informs your understanding and your knowledge of God. And it's a very Gnostic ideology, which is why they don't evangelize, why they say that, oh, well, we just want to have a dialogue with all these other religions. But at the end of the day, they're selling a Gnostic idea about this experiential religion. And so when you have these near-death experiences and people selling and spewing this thought that, well, all religions are basically the same, it's just a difference of certain aspects of what we believe, and that your experience of life is really the only thing that matters, and then you'll learn as you are reincarnated, etc. This idea is completely counter and opposed to what the Catholic Church has always taught, and to what our Lord Jesus Christ taught when he was walking the earth, and what his entire incarnation is all about. So it's an incompatible thought. But what the modernists do is they don't espouse these things as doctrinal, but they allow the question to remain open-ended so that they can have this dialogue and let people believe what they believe without any correction.
Just over the weekend, I saw there was a video that resurfaced around the internet of a Muslim at a Catholic mass, with the Muslim call to prayer in Galway. And this St. Patrick, he must just be begging the Lord for extra graces for his country and for the world, because we have sold our heritage, our patrimony for the price of a pot of stew. We've given it up like Esau gave up the right of the firstborn. When we invite in this fake and false religion into the Catholic Mass, it's a blasphemy. It's an atrocity. And we don't even understand what we're doing, Michael Hichborn. We have no clue what we are doing, it seems. Jesus is the way, the truth, and life, and there's no salvation outside of his one holy Catholic and Apostolic Church. And we seem to have forgotten that, haven't we?
Well, I would say that Esau got the better deal than we have, because at least he got a bowl of porridge for it.
Yes.
We're not getting anything of that kind. We're simply just swallowing a lie, whole hook, line, and sinker. So that's the problem, though. People seem to think that there's something to be gained by allowing false religions to operate within the church, or to allow us to or allow other people to believe that their faith is somehow beneficial. But there is no advantage to that. There just isn't. And that's the lie that we're being sold today, and that's what we're being told to go out and profess. But God help us for doing so.
But the Archbishop in Glasgow apparently blessed a brand new cross for the Jubilee. And I look at it and I say, you know what? Just at a basic level, there's nothing on this cross that says to me Christian. Almost nothing. There's the shape of the cross, but beyond that, nothing about this says to me Christian whatsoever. Mike, welcome back. Michael, welcome back. Did you see this cross? What were your thoughts?
I did see the cross, and I'll tell you that there are multiple layers to the meaning of this cross. It's not something that you can just look. First of all, you look at it and you go, okay, is this something that was produced by Fisher Price or Play School? This is kind of silly. But then you start looking at the symbols. Why the choice of colors? Why the individual symbols that are on the four arms of the cross? What does this mean? And you're right, there's nothing Christian about it at all. First and foremost, I want to point out the symbols, because if you look at the picture of the cross, you'll see at the very top there's an icon of a bird. To the right, where it's green, there's an icon of a tree. At the bottom, where it's blue, there's an icon of a fish. And then to the left, where it's red, there's an icon of a bell. There are several ways to look at this. First of all, and the most obvious way, to the uninitiated, the one who doesn't really know what the symbols mean, it looks like you're looking at something representing air, earth, water, and fire, the four elements. There is a correlation to the coat of arms of Glasgow, because the bird does represent. It has. Let me pull this up, because I think this is the best way to describe it. So the coat of arms of Glasgow is the official emblem of the city of Glasgow. It features four key objects, each with a symbolic meaning. The bird commemorates the wild robin that Saint Cerf, Saint Mungo's master, had tamed. The tree represents originally a hazel branch in legend. It's now an oak. The fish symbolizes a story about a king who threw a ring into the river Clyde after his wife gave it to a knight who lost it. And the bell is one of the four key objects in the coat of arms. So there is a connection with the coat of arms of Glasgow. However, one of the things that the modernists, that the occultists, they love to do is have a double meaning for everything, so that they can speak in the language of the church, or they can speak in the language of the common man, and it sounds like they're saying things on our level, but really they're talking above our heads so that they can say something more to the initiates that they have within their ranks rather than to the commoner. So the four colors of this cross, the red, the blue, yellow, and green, represent in truth the four elements. If you read anything about alchemy or you read anything about the arcane arts, they will all talk about the elements, and they talk about the colors corresponding with them. Red is fire, yellow is air, blue is water, and green is earth. And the four elements are also oddly corresponding or correspondent with this cross here. It looks very similar to the rose cross of the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. Anybody who has read about the occult, knows anything about Rosicrucianism, will recognize that this particular cross, of the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, is steeped in black magic. It's where Wicca comes from. It's where now the thing about the Golden Dawn, you've got to realize that a lot of prominent members of society have been a part of this. Like William Butler Yeats, the poet, was a member of the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. Bram Stoker was a member. Aleister Crowley he was one of the founding members there, and then he left it because it wasn't it wasn't magic enough. He wanted something deeper. But they have this particular cross, and their rose cross has the colors red, yellow, green, and blue corresponding to the four arms, and it all has an elemental significance. So if you look at this particular cross that was erected in Glasgow, there seems very definitely to be a correlation with the alchemical and arcane elements operating within the church, the Masonic elements within the church. And, well, it is, but what are they signifying to their members? See, when you see something like this, they're not talking to us. They're mocking us for sure, but they're not talking to us. They're talking to their own members. And what are they telling their own members? What they're saying is that we now have the elemental and the alchemical capture of the Catholic Church. And if you remember a couple of years ago, there was a phrase that was understood within the church, coagula et salve.
I remember.
To break down and then to reform. So coagula et salve is this, it's a satanic idea. There is a Masonic element to it as well. But the idea is to break down what you have and then to reform it into something new. So what they're saying and what they're telling their own initiates within their ranks is that we have now broken down the church and we are prepared to reform it in our own image and likeness. That book, The War of the Antichrist by Monsignor Dillon that Tan put out a couple of I guess it was about a year and a half ago or so. Great book because it covers all of what you just said. You know, one of the things that stands out, and I think I remember Dr. Anthony Sy talking about that just this morning, is there's no corpus on this cross. And, in this particular location in Glasgow, there's no corpus anywhere on the altar itself. So they have removed Christ himself from the actual liturgy there, with the exception of the processional cross, which they still have. That seems like, I just don't get from a common sense level how any bishop, priest, or anybody else in the church would be okay with that. But clearly they are, Michael, because they're just all celebrating this insane image. Well, yeah, and the fact that a bishop was apparently okay with this shows that he's either been captured ideologically or he's a part of what it represents. There really is no other way to interpret this. He's either exceedingly weak in his faith and has no concept of what the Catholic Church really teaches, or he's a part of the problem. Well, he's part of the problem either way, but he's part of the intended problem.
Did you like that video? It's okay. You can admit it. It's perfectly fine. Hey, we cover the big stories of our day, from inside the church to outside the church to all points in between, and we do it from a Catholic perspective. It's called A Catholic Take. It's a radio program Monday through Friday. We live stream it right here on this channel, by the way, so make sure to subscribe, like, and share. We would be very grateful to you. And don't forget, you're going to want to watch this video right here because you don't want to miss anything.